So welcome to everyone. It's good to see you here. A little bit of an introduction, and then we're going to jump into the learning with the bracha, the blessing for learning, and then the texts. So let's do that. My name is Menachem Creditor. I serve as scholar in residence for UJ Federation of New York, and it is my honor to lead a conversation with all of us. We'll be using text and hopefully each other's hearts, and even the chat function as a way of expressing all of those things. This conversation is called Shofar, the Piercing Cry. And I wanted to start with a story, but before I start with the story, let's start with a blessing. So if you know this melody, I invite you to sing it loudly. You're on mute, so you can sing as loudly as you'd like. And you're on mute, so if you don't know it, you can still sing really loudly, and it'll seem like you know it. The point of the blessing is la'asok b'divrei Torah, to be busy with words of Torah, and that basically means that for all of the density of Jewish learning, the goal is not to walk away with facts and things you can repeat. The goal is to be present and to engage. If we walk away from today's conversation saying that there was something emotional and meaningful that we went through, that we shared, that we took the time from our day to dedicate ourselves towards meaning making, that is a fulfillment of the mitzvah to learn. So I feel fulfilled already. You're all here. And we've got 79 good friends on a Zoom call for Torah. What could be better? I know, being in a room with 79 of our good friends getting ready to share Torah. So one day soon, may we be blessed in that way too. But let's not miss this chance. Here we go. Starts without the words, just the la la la. Now we're ready to jump in. This is, that melody is written by my friend Rabbi David Paskin. It's on an album we recorded together a number of years ago. And I recommend, if you're looking for some nice Jewish music and you don't already know it, jump right in and find David's stuff. He's a very, very special musician and a nice guy. So, friends, here's the story. I served for 16 years as a pulpit rabbi, and among my favorite things in the world to do in that role was to be a guide for people on their journey into Judaism. Someone either, I'll put a chat with Rabbi Paskin's name on it so you can find it there. All right, now you can look him up. He's a lovely guy, and that's how you spell his name. As a pulpit rabbi, I would often encounter someone coming into my office and saying, you know, Rabbi, I'm curious about Judaism, or I want to be a Jew. And my stump speech that I basically would say to each of them was, you probably expect me to send you away 3 times. It's this practice that people talk about. It even was featured on an episode of Sex and the City, where Charlotte is interested in Judaism and a rabbi sends her away. What I've said to the people who come to me is that if I send you away 3 times, there are 3 things I'm communicating accidentally. One of them is, I'm mean. And I don't want to be mean. One of the other things I might be communicating is that Torah isn't worth it. And boy, do I think Torah is worth it. And the other thing I might accidentally communicate is that you haven't been thoughtful. And then I say, look, you're so brave. We don't know each other yet, and you showed up with an open heart talking about something that's important to you, wanting to share it with me. Not only do I think you're thoughtful, not only do I think you're brave, I am now realizing and remembering all the things about Judaism that are awesome, worthy of your interest, that I might have taken for granted because it's been my experience since my birth. And this story that I'm about to share with you is one of those things that I never could have experienced had it not been through the wisdom and the open heart of someone that I was working with. So his name is Matt. I won't tell you more than that about him, except that he's an incredibly important person to me for many reasons. He's about 7 feet tall, literally. And he's got these shoulders. He's from Texas. Like, you think about some 7-foot tall guy from Texas, that's my friend Matt. And he began exploring Judaism around this time of the year, just before Rosh Hashanah. He comes to shul and he sits through hours and hours of a service he just doesn't understand, even though he did some good prep work. And after Musaf is over, he came to me crying. And he said to me, I won't exactly say what he said, because I did tell you he's from Texas. And there are certain things rabbis, I don't even know what the words mean. He said, Rabbi, it's real. It's real. Just like that. I said, what do you mean? He said, that horn, it's real. And he was trembling. And it was in that moment that I finally heard the sound of the shofar that we had already sounded. I'd called for the sound, but I hadn't heard it the way that he had. Matt opened my ears and my heart because of the way he heard it. I'll tell you one other thing you might know about. There's a practice in some deaf communities, because you might imagine shofar is a very different thing if you're deaf. Many people in these communities hold balloons so that when the shofar is sounded, the vibration can be physically felt in their hands. There's something really primal about this sound. And what I want to do very briefly is look through some of the beautiful texts that are there in tradition. The origin of shofar and how it's been understood here and there through time. What I'll ask you to do is also see yourselves as participant in the conversation. If there's anything that I say that isn't exactly clear, or if there's a response that you have, please just say so. And it'll be a great thing for us to be able to look at together, to think about out loud. And one last thing, if you'd like, there's a great practice that I have. I learned it from a colleague of mine recently, that while you're teaching or in a Zoom meeting, actually look at the other people who are here. Actually look at their smiling faces. Actually look at the different kinds of community that we have the power to convene. I know we know this. We are definitely doing this. When there was a Zoom outage just 2 hours ago, I think the whole world went, oh, what am I going to do without Zoom? Which means Zoom has become something real, something that we expect, something that we, look forward to. It's too complicated, but something that we appreciate or could. So I'm very grateful that we have each other, and I hope that you'll look at each other's faces, because you've got nice faces. It's nice to see each other. So, we ready? We good? Text time? Okay, here we go, everybody. Let's see if Zoom recovered enough to allow for some screen sharing. Now I see you all. Do you see each other and the text? I'm looking for some nods from people. Yes. All right. Thanks, Jody. Those an enthusiastic thumbs. Okay. Marla, you lost audio. I'm not sure how to help, but I would look forward to being able to hear each other. And if you lost audio, I just realized you can't hear anything I'm saying to you. Okay. Well, I wish you luck. The backstage wizards are going to help us. So this is Shofar, the piercing cry. Some basic text from the Torah one basic text from the Torah that gives us an origin. You might know this because we recite this on Rosh Hashanah. This comes straight out of Leviticus. And by the way, all of these sources are easily accessible on sefaria.org. if you didn't catch that, I just put the link into your chat. That is a website that rivals the Library of Alexandria. Every Jewish text that is worthy of exploring, almost all of them, are available and in translation here. Can you have the text? I would love to share it with you, but I think that I'll have to just, it'll be too complicated to do it in this moment. Let's do the screen sharing, and you can reach out to myjewishlearning.com and get me an email, and I'll send it to you privately. This is straight out of Leviticus. The Hebrews, Daber el bnei Israel lemor b'chodesh hashvi'i. Actually, you know what? We talk too much. Let's sing. Daber el bnei Israel lemor b'chodesh hashvi'i b'echad lachodesh yeh lachem Shabbaton zichron Torah mikra kodesh. So the description in the Torah is, speak to the children of Israel, meaning God says to Moses, speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the 1st of the month, shall be for you a day of rest, a remembrance of the sounding of the shofar, a holy assembly. So we might have a few questions. One of the things that you might notice about it is that it's the 7th month. But Rosh Hashanah is not the 7th month in the way that we think about the calendar. What's really powerful is to recognize that time starts and then time starts again. The Jewish people's beginning of the year in the Torah is Nisan, the month of Pesach, because that's when we were born as a people. That's when Jewish time began. But that's not when time began. On Rosh Hashanah, we celebrate the beginning of the universe. One of the interesting things that people don't realize about Rosh Hashanah, especially because in a typical year, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are the days when more of us show up than any other time. But Rosh Hashanah, ironically, is not a specifically Jewish story. Rosh Hashanah doesn't have the typical Jewish holiday story. You know how that one goes. They tried to kill us, they failed, let's eat. We don't have that on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, no one was out to get us. Rosh Hashanah is not even about Jewish emergence in Jewish life. It's about life. It is our tradition, our particular way of talking about everyone. I'm not praying for one slice of the earth to be reborn. We are praying for the earth to be reborn. It is a radical action on the part of Jewish tradition to emphasize universal welfare. It's not about our tribe, even though we have our story. It is about everyone's story. So let's look at the very next text. Let's stay in this text for a second. The 7th month in the Torah's counting, since it starts with Nisan, is our month of Tishrei. Okay, so our beginning of the year is the Torah's 7th month. And it's interesting to see that the purpose of the shofar is also mentioned. So what's the purpose of the shofar? You can feel free to chat in answers as quickly as you feel like it, but I'll keep on talking because I'm a rabbi, that's what we do. The purpose of this is a mikra kodesh, is a holy assembly, a day of bringing things together. And just being really open about it, really bearing. This year is a complicated year. Countless ways, countless ways. But isn't it powerful to remember that the sound of the shofar reverberates through time and through space? As some of you were writing, it's a wake-up call, but a wake-up call for what? The Torah's language is a mikra kodesh, a holy calling out. And you call out to the people come together. So I want to ask you in the biggest of ways to say to yourself, what can I do to bring people together safely, responsibly? How can we understand together this year so that A, speaking again very personally, to reduce my aloneness in this moment, but not to do it in such a way that I disregard your safety and welfare. Togetherness is going to take good thinking. And so many communities are giving this good thought, but I didn't want to leave behind the Torah's imperative that we not be alone on these days. So the question is, how can we make sure that we're not alone? Part of the answer is your sweet faces right now. Another one, to send out Rosh Hashanah cards that the post office should have the resources to deliver. I'll just say that once. So Now we're looking at the Rosh Hashanah text. We're going straight from the Torah's time to the Talmud's time, and you might imagine we are jumping all around through time. But we're going to go in order, even though there's a lot of stuff in between. This is from Rosh Hashanah, page 16a. Rabbi Abahu said, I'm taking it straight from the translation here, why does one sound a blast with a shofar made from a ram's horn on Rosh Hashanah? Right? We could make sounds with any kind of thing. The Holy Blessed One said, sound a blast before me with a shofar made from a ram's horn, so that I will remember for you the binding of Isaac, the son of Abraham, in whose stead a ram was sacrificed. And I will ascribe it to you as if you had bound yourselves before me. All right, friends, now we're really starting. On Rosh Hashanah, we read the story of the binding of Isaac. And, you know, it's worthy of pause. Why would we read that story? We read it once, certainly, when the Torah cycle comes around. Why did the rabbis choose for us to read the story about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac on Rosh Hashanah? And why does the shofar say to God, remember us as if we had bound ourselves before you? Is that a good thing? Is the binding of Isaac, certainly not a simple thing, is the binding of Isaac a good thing? Are we reading the story to praise the valor of Abraham? And even more specifically, look at the way this text says it. I will ascribe to you as if you had bound yourselves before me. What's strange about that? There's something very strange about that. As if you had bound yourselves before me. Who bound themselves before God? No one. No one. Abraham bound Isaac. This was not Isaac binding himself. The Midrash suggests he's big enough to hold the wood on his back when they were climbing up the mountain. Oh, he was old enough. Judah, beautiful answer. Jews who wear tefillin, every day we bind ourselves. This is language I've heard elsewhere. We bind ourselves to ourselves with tefillin. It's a gorgeous idea. Ruth, beautiful question. Are we bound by the rules and guides of the Torah voluntarily? I heard a talk once about the problematics of the chosen people as a title, and it was re-understood by that teacher that we are called to be the choosing people, to choose the covenant actively. Does that make it voluntary? I'll quote the famous rabbis known as the Indigo Girls. If you like the Indigo Girls, a really wonderful folk rock band, in one of their songs they say, the closer I am bound in love to you, the closer I am to free. And the ancient sage Sting said, if you love someone, set them free. And if you go even further back, now I'll actually go to Psalms, right? Ani avdecha ben amatecha pitachta lemoserai. I am your servant, the child of your servant. You have loosened my bonds. Which ultimately means that in relationship, of course I'm free to choose, but I obligate myself in that relationship. So it might be voluntary, but only on one level. As the famous Jewish philosopher Franz Rosenzweig put it, love commands. So looking back at this text, yes, by the way, I'm not going to respond to every comment, but these are beautiful. This is beautiful. I will say, you know, Deb said, we act as if we were freed from slavery in Egypt. Pesach is the recreation of that moment, the re-entering of it. Well, the dynamic of standing at the Akedah, which is not the creation of the world, but a deep moment of tribulation. Maybe we stand in that stress. Maybe the shofar blast, as Reba said, is a call to action to help solve problems in society. Do we bind ourselves to each other? Do we bind ourselves to ourselves? Do we bind ourselves at all? What does being bound up mean? So let's go back to the text. And I'll do some handy-dandy annotating if it allows me. It does not allow me. Oh well, I like to draw circles and stuff around my text. One day soon I'll do that again. Rabbi Abahu said again, why does one sound a blast with a shofar made of a ram's horn? Because it reminds you of the Akedah. Now just remember that the story of the Akedah practically ends when Isaac is not sacrificed and a ram is caught in the thicket by its thorns. There's some great gospel songs that deal with that. So when we hold the ram's horn, who are we? Well, Avram did not blow a ram's horn. What he did is he was ready to sacrifice his child, and then he left. And Isaac was about to be sacrificed, and he left. And in fact, they never speak to each other again. Many people believe that that is testimony to the test being failed. And in fact, God never speaks to Avram again either. There's a lot of brokenness in that moment. So when we blow shofar and we re-enter that moment, what are we asking for? So I'm going to move forward in the text, not because we're solving any of these questions, but because the shofar that we blast every morning during this month that we're in Elul, to wake ourselves up. You can find countless rabbis blowing shofar all over the place, and it's on social media. I encourage you to find it. Find it. Close your eyes and imagine you're in the room. Where does it bring you? Does it bring you to this moment of history? Speaking personally, does it bring me to the moment where I'm calling shofar and my children are under my tallis with me and the whole community just quivers? Does it remind me of being a child when my father would call shofar, where I would just quiver hearing his voice and then that primal sound? Does it bring me back to my friend Matt, who taught me that it's real, that it's beyond words? Let's look at what some other voices have said the shofar represents. And Yigal, yes, to the question of, not Yigal. Judah, you asked, does it remind us of our brokenness? We're going to get to some of those texts in a moment. Interesting voices in answer. And Yigal's asking, does it have to be a shofar from a ram's horn, or can it be from the Kudu Horn? I wish I could tell you. I don't know what a kudu is, so I'm clearly not the person to answer that question. But there are some halachic minds who do talk about whether or not different kinds of animals are acceptable. So this is Sadia Gaon, one of the earlier modern rabbis. By modern, I mean, he was born in 892. So that's what I mean by modern in the scope of Jewish history. So we're not going to read all of these, but this is some of what he said the shofar represents. This day is the beginning of creation, when God created the world and ruled over it. And you would blow the shofar at the beginning of the king's reign. So that means this is the inauguration of God. I remember hearing a rabbi once talk to the community. It was after an inauguration, a presidential inauguration. And the rabbi said to the community, you showed up on time for the presidential inauguration, but you came late to shul today. Which inauguration is more important? This great, very like fire brimstone sermon. Anyway, the shofar blast is calling us to see who's actually in charge. Right, that's number one. But number two, we blow the shofar in order to announce that all those who wish to do tshuva, to return, to be better, to become our best selves again, that shofar wakes us up. So one is it points to who's in charge. Number two is it shocks my heart into action again. Number three, and this is present in many verses that we recite on Rosh Hashanah, the shofar blast on Mount Sinai. It's so powerful that when Moses goes up to Sinai, the whole mountain is encased in smoke, like the fire of a kiln, and the sound of the shofar was very loud, but no one ever says who was blowing the shofar. It's that primal sound that, how could a human generate it anyway, even if we've seen it happen countless times? So a few more. Number 6 repeats what the Gemara said. It reminds us of the binding of Isaac, who was ready to give his life for the sake of heaven, which, again, remembering the Torah's text in Genesis, no, he wasn't. Isaac didn't do anything. It was done to Isaac. That's one of the dynamics of the story. Number 7, this gets to my friend Matt. When we hear the sound of the shofar, we will tremble. It's not, we'll remember one specific thing. We will tremble, hearing the shofar. And by hearing, I don't know what it is to be deaf and to hold the balloon, but the air quivers. I had a friend when I was a rabbi in Berkeley, California, who played tuba for the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. And he would blow shofar. He could have made the shofar sound like anything. I mean, really, he was just an exquisite musician, is an exquisite musician. And he would come to me before he would blow shofar and say, Rabbi, angry, quiet, humble, piercing? Meaning he was asking for what intuitive mode was he going to make this sound? How is he going to reverberate through shofar? The trembling is something that if you take the moment before the shofar is blasted, you hear it, you feel it differently. Haskell, yes, you're correct. Isaac is not passive in that he willingly carries the wood. But if you remember the very, very tricky language that his father offers, right? Remember, Isaac says, where is the sacrifice? Here's the wood, here's the knife. Where's the sacrifice? Abraham doesn't answer directly. God will show the sacrifice, my son. There's a very complicated dynamic what Isaac willingly does and what he doesn't do. It's worthy of a full conversation another time. So just moving forward, the last 8, according to Sadia Gaon, the reasons for blowing the shofar are about the world to come. I'll just read them. The shofar reminds us of the ultimate day of judgment. The shofar reminds us of the gathering of the exiles. And the shofar reminds us to believe in the resurrection of the dead. So again, I don't know your theology. I don't know how you look at these big Jewish ideas. They are deep and ancient and worthy of another conversation. Maybe mydewishlearning.com can take this list of 10 and do their own series on it. But ultimately, this world needs to be reborn, and that's one of the central messages of Rosh Hashanah. The world as it is not good enough. And you and I, in this moment of our world's experience, could point to lots of ways the world is not as it should be. Maybe the shofar is to shock us into imagining the world being better than we think it's going to be. Not just better than it is, better than we expect. So what I want to do is continue moving forward in the text, but what I'm aiming to do with this class, with this conversation, is to give you too much to think about. My goal is for the complexity and intensity of the shofar's meanings to start swirling in our heads and hearts. I want us to ask ourselves the way my friend Peter asked me before blowing shofar. So I'm looking at your faces as I ask you this right now. Fierce, gentle, angry, quiet, trembling, hopeful. If you were blowing shofar right now, what sound would it make? Does it point to the hope that the idea of the world to come represents? I mean, I'm asking the question of you, and tears are coming to my eyes. Wondering about this world, trying desperately to hope for this world. Deb, you said it. Everything and more at the same time. All of it. Razel, you said yearning. Jody said decisive. I mean, all of this. All of this. I think it's hard to know what the shofar means when someone else is blowing it. But that's also one of the reasons the mitzvah, when the person blowing shofar recites the blessing, they don't say it's a mitzvah to blow shofar. It's a mitzvah lishmoa kol shofar, to hear it. And that means there's an active filter that my soul provides. I'm called to activate it. We're each called to activate it. When you hear shofar, maybe having empathy with someone else's feelings. What are they feeling when they're blowing shofar? If you're the one blowing shofar, maybe being aware of what you're pouring into it. It's your air. So I see that people are asking for the list. What we'll do before we end this meeting, I don't want to do it in the middle of it. I'm going to turn this into a link that you can all have. All right. So when we're done with the class formally, stick around, and I'll put on the chat a link. But I don't want to take the time in the middle to do that right now. So this is jumping forward in time. This is Maimonides, right? It's a gorgeous, I mean, it's so interesting. He's such a rationalist, but here he's so emotional. Deb, that's a great idea to take a pic of your laptop screen, but I have a feeling that not everyone knows how to do that as readily as you do. So thank you for the suggestion. Those who can, I hope, have. those who find that challenging, I will do my best to be present with you too. So this is what Rambam says in his Mishnah Torah, his code of Jewish law. The true, remember there are three sounds. There's tekiah, there's shivarim, and tru'ah. There are three sounds. Tekiah is one long blast, shivarim is 3, and tru'ah is 7. And each one of them has their own feel, has their own staccato feel, their own continuous feel. So there's tru'ah that the Torah discusses. Due to the many layers of exile, we are unsure what it is. Isn't it nice to hear someone in charge say, I'm really not sure about that? Isn't it nice to have a humble leader, a humble teacher? It may be, this is that we should unpack this. Ruth, tru'ah, some say is 9, some say is 7. The rule, by the way, about the teaching, here, I'll scroll up just for a second. Remember, it's the 7th month on the 1st of the month. There are Kabbalists who actually say that the 7th month is a hint to the 7 sounds of tru'ah. So not everyone has the same derivation. So anyway, what I was going to say about the Maimonides text I just put back on the screen, realize that many of us will have responses to the gender stuff in here. Let's make sure we name that. We can use our critical faculty and respond to it. But for now, let's just read what he's saying and treat it another time. Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you. The backstage people, the amazing wizards and Jedis at myjewishlearning.com have asked you to email community@myjewishlearning.com if you'd like a copy of the sources. I'll send it to them. They'll send it to you. Now we've got it all worked out. Thank you, everybody. So the tru'ah that the Torah discusses, due to the many layers of exile, we are unsure what it is. It may be the wail that women wail amongst themselves while crying. There's an ancient tradition, by the way, at funerals, we would hire miyalelot. We would hire, there would be women hired whose job it was to shriek and cry to open your heart. Maybe that's the sound of the shofar, not women, but shrieking to open our heart, to shock us into acknowledging grief when we feel it. It's intense, this sound. It may be the sigh that one does, one after the other, while they are worried about a great stress. That doesn't need translating for any of us right now. Maybe never, but certainly not right now. Maybe the sound of the shofar is stress. Let it out. Scream it out. Sigh. I actually found myself, I haven't talked about this with anybody, except my therapist. So now you get to share some of that experience too. That's what you signed up for, right? There's a moment where, for the first time in a month, I think I was alone in my house. I walked around and I realized, like, oh my God, how intense this experience is. And not only did I sigh, I made one of those, like, you know, yoga teachers tell you to sigh, like really let out a sound you try not to do in company or in polite conversation. And I found that sound to be so honest and so, even for me, unanticipated. Maybe that's what the shofar is, the sound we don't want to let out. Yes, Razel, you're saying it right? It's a krext. Those who have ever trained in chazanut or know the Yiddish origin of the word, that's a sound that your soul makes, and it can't really be translated. I'm assuming we each have our own way of emitting it. So I wouldn't at all presume to project my expression on you, but I bless us to find a moment where no one's listening. Not even your protective self, where your inner self just pours it all out. Maybe that's what the shofar is trying to evoke. And then look what Rambam does. So it may be the wailing, it may be the sighing, it may also be both together. The sigh followed by the cry, as it usually comes afterwards. Because if we are that raw, somehow that vulnerable, even in ourselves, and we let out the sigh, we're probably going to cry. And maybe that's just so good to do. Right? I'm looking around, maybe you all remember, right? It's okay to cry. crying gets a set out of you. Right? Literally free to be you, free to be me. Like, thank God. So maybe the shofar is freedom. The freedom to just let it out. A sound that is beyond and before words. Maybe the brokenness of the shofar is the binding of Isaac, because no one walked away from that unscathed. Not the ram, not Isaac, not Abraham, not Sarah, who isn't even mentioned in it, and probably not God. Maybe the ultimate reminder of the shofar is to God of what brokenness feels like, that we don't want that anymore. So Rambam says it may also be both together, the sigh followed by the cry, as it usually comes afterwards. This may be called tru'ah, as this is the way of a worrier, to first sigh, then cry. This is so Jewish. We therefore do all options. Like, he's not saying it to be silly, but that's what we do. We worry and we cry and we sigh. I have a memory. My uncle's in this conversation right now. I have a memory of my great uncle, my dad Ralph. And among the memories that come up for me when I think of him, he died right before my bar mitzvah. But he would sit down on the couch. It might have been Thanksgiving or Pesach, and he would make this sound. He would sit down and go, huh. That was the most Jewish sound I knew at the time. Just like, that's what it feels like to sit down. I'm resting. Oh, the world's on my shoulders, but not for the second. Maybe that's also what the shofar is. A call out of relief. A simple primal sound that I make when I sit down finally. The weight of the world off my shoulders for a second, because I believe it can be recreated. The shofar reminds me that it's ancient and we've worried before. And we've cried before. So you can cry now, you can worry now, but believe in a world that goes beyond your time too. So now we're going to get Hasidic. Are you ready? I'm just letting you know, we're changing tone. This is Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in a talk he gave in 1963. He says, blowing the shofar is the unique and special mitzvah, which is an integral obligation of Rosh Hashanah. The mitzvah of shofar is not a gathering of multiple musical instruments, but rather it is by necessity one instrument. I don't know if you have the tradition that many communities do. Everybody blows shofar at the very end. For one part of that, when everyone's blowing, I know some have the competition who's going to last the longest, but for one moment, all the sounds really do meld, and it's one primal cry. Furthermore, it is not a complex instrument that is capable of playing exceptional compositions, unless you're my friend Peter, or a good flautist. The shofar is perforce a simple animal horn. And as our sages say in the Gemara, all sounds are kosher for the shofar. Whatever the shofar sounds like is what the shofar sounds like. Said like we were saying before, whatever your cry sounds like, that's your cry. Whatever your sigh sounds like, that's your sigh. You are the instrument. As complicated as we all are, and we all are, we're just a single, simple instrument, and we have a sound that is pure. And Rosh Hashanah is an invitation to find that again. The shofar emphasizes, back to his text, that our presence of mind must be first and foremost focused on the individual. You are here. I am here. What does the Chazan say just before the repetition of the Musaf Amidah? This language is a little bit obscure. During the place where Rosh Hashanah really has its biggest flavor, and the service leader brings us through it, what do they say? They say, Hineni, I'm right here. And in the middle of that paragraph, they say, and I'm nothing special, but please God, hear me as if I am. This Rosh Hashanah, no matter where we find ourselves, I think it is a big, big, important call to your soul to say this Rosh Hashanah, Hineni, I'm here. And if you pardon me, just to be a little bit emphatic about this, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, God. This year is challenging in ways I have never seen before, and I'm not going anywhere. And that takes incredible courage and vulnerability right now. Because what I really want to do most moments when I'm honest with myself about the state of this world, I just want to cry really loudly. And then I want to open my eyes and see that it was a dream. But since the crying can happen and that waking up to it being a dream, that part's not, the shofar calls me to imagine a world that could be reborn again, which I really can't see right now. So the purity of our individual sounds have to be audible to God, which means we have to let it out. All the protective barriers and walls that we put up all year long in all of our relationships with family, with friends, with God, we have to let those walls down and not build them up again intentionally. We have to allow ourselves to pulse with the universe. And the shofar is that call to pulse with the universe, and not from a place of sophisticated thinking, but from a place of wounded humanity. I've got my sound and you do too, and I don't make it when I'm happy. This world doesn't feel all that happy many moments right now, but there are moments of hope that can emerge. So he says our emphasis, I'm just closing out Schneerson here, our emphasis must be on infusing holiness even into the common parts of our daily lives. Then the focus shifts to how the individual is part of the community. So I got to tell you, even with all of the intensity and the struggle that I just named a second ago, I'm looking at your faces. I said it before, I mean it. It's not planned. I didn't know who was showing up. I'm so grateful that I have a heart that beats and a keyboard to type into so that I can tell you when I can't say it out loud how much I care. I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad that the sun is shining. I'm so grateful that I have a guitar nearby and fingers with which to play it. I'm so grateful to see us breathing right now. I'm really taking time and scrolling through your faces because we need each other. This world is broken and we have each other. Isn't that how it's always been? Isn't that how it always is, especially as we get a little bit older? We know that's how it is. So a little bit more. This is a beautiful teaching by a friend of mine. I went from 63 to 2004, just so you know. I figured, what happened in between those years? There's Rabbi Matthew Berkowitz, who is an artist and a scholar who lives in Israel right now. He writes, "It is for this reason I believe that we are granted the gift of multiple calls of the shofar." Remember, Tekiah, Shvarim, Truah, a whole sound 3, and then 7 or 9. Tekiah means that which is rooted. Takua literally means rooted. Shvarim, from the word lishbor, to break, means that which is broken. And Truah refers to an image of shaking. Ri'ada means trembling. As we enter the Yamim Noraim, the days of all, we are, as the Tekiah, call of the shofar, fixed and rooted, hardened by our routines. I think he wrote that in 2004, not 2020. But okay. Elul, this month, presents us with the challenge of becoming shvarim, of examining and critiquing ourselves so that we can break ourselves, indeed be able to shake ourselves out of a spiritual malaise. And we close with the Tekiah Gdolah, with the help of a great long sound representing the rebirth of the self. By the end of Yom Kippur, with the help of God, we have managed to build ourselves up again, to a new passionate home. Perhaps, and this is a comment he writes actually on next week's Parsha, this is the meaning of Rashi's commentary on Deuteronomy 26:16, which states, "The Lord your God commands you this day to observe these laws and rules. Observe them faithfully with all your heart and your soul." Rashi, the prolific medieval commentator, writes, the meaning of this verse is that every day should be fresh in your eyes as if the Torah were commanded to you on this day. To approach Judaism with a fresh set of eyes and renewed sense of purpose is ultimately the goal of this period of repentance. May we each strive for such renewal and emerge from the heightened sanctity of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, each of us as a Tekiah Gdolah. The only thing I want to do to this beautiful language by my friend Matthew is to amplify it. I don't want to only approach Judaism with a fresh set of eyes. I want to approach this world with a fresh set of eyes. Only with eyes remade for wonder, as Rabbi Larry Kushner puts it. Only with eyes remade for wonder can we see a world worthy of our children and our children's children, especially in this moment. Only with eyes that can imagine beyond what I can see. As my father says, Haro'eh et hanolad, to see what hasn't been born yet. Only with those eyes can we be part of a world where the sun truly shines for everybody and vulnerability is equally distributed. Razel, you made this beautiful suggestion to practice closing your eyes while listening to the shofar. Maybe that's the dream, right? Maybe that's the best way to do it. If I close my eyes when I go through the process of tekiah, the rootedness, shvarim, the brokenness, tru'ah, the sort of the shaking, trembling part of it, and then I wait for that tekiah dolah, that long blast with my eyes closed, I can imagine the world that's being described. It goes through the period of brokenness and trembling and then emerges whole. Maybe with my eyes closed, I can see all that. With my eyes open, I'm distracted by what we have so far. Maybe the shofar is there to help us imagine what we haven't yet achieved, which begins with this self. Got one last text. This is from my friend, my classmate at Columbia, actually, Rabbi Jill Jacobs. She writes, the shofar reveals a secret. Wholeness and brokenness cannot be separated from one another. As we do a cheshbon nefesh, a personal accounting, and delve deeper into ourselves, we may find cracks that we never before noticed. Only a sincere encounter with this brokenness will allow us to put ourselves back together again, more whole than before. So I wanted to ask you, I'm going to stop the share so we can only have each other for this moment. And again, remember to email, what's the email? I'm going to repost in the chat so that those who have joined since can have it. This is the email that you send an email to, and we'll get you all the texts. I wanted to ask you to take a moment, because even though so many of us, I think, have a lot of time on our hands, I don't know that we're, well, Cecilia, shake your head, not everybody. I'm finding myself not so relaxed. Maybe that was overstatement, but I think that we're a combination of very busy and staying still sometimes. I don't know. Maybe it's too confusing to actually describe what's going on. But I would ask us to take a moment right now and make a personal statement. This isn't, it's not for everybody. This kind of conversation, this kind of cheshbon nefesh, the internal accounting. Yeah, Judah, that's Alan Liu. Right, we're quoting Rabbi Alan Liu, Zichrono Livracha, to get going and stay still. That's Nitzavim Vayelech. That's his teaching on beautiful stuff in the Torah. I don't know that I'm giving anyone an assignment, but maybe this could be some good homework to do during the month of Elul leading up to Rosh Hashanah. Maybe writing down on a piece of paper the 3 sounds of the shofar. Tekiah, Shvarim, Tru'ah. And answering the question of, what is my tekiah feeling? What's my sound? Tekiah, the rootedness. What am I rooted in? What came before me? What roots helped me arrive where I am right now? Where am I and why? And next to Shvarim, maybe I would put a question like, in what ways am I broken? In what ways does that correspond to something larger than me in the world? Not how can I erase it, or how can I answer it, but how do I hold that brokenness? How does it move me forward? How can my specific brokenness, the ways in which I have those cracks. How can I name that out loud so that other people know that they're not alone in their brokenness, and remind myself that I'm not alone either? Not how can I be not broken? I will always be broken in some ways. How can I feel safe and broken at the same time? And maybe that final sound, which is of course not the final sound. True ah. I want to quote John Lewis, right? Like, the trembling can be good trembling. What kind of trembling is good for me? What does trembling do that can help? What makes me tremble? And I know by my own, sometimes my facial expressions, I know that when I worry that something beautiful is not going to happen, I tremble. And when I'm in that beautiful thing, when thank God it's happening, I tremble. So what are the good tremblings? And then that final sound. I hold my breath for it, really I do. And I hear my father's call for shofar. It's always his voice that I hear, even when I'm doing the one calling, I hear him doing it. He does this soft, Tekiah Gedolah. Just simple. The big, awesome sound. So I don't know that there's a question there. Maybe the Tekiah Gedolah is the possibility of an answer. Faith that there will be an answer. So I want to bless you all. And I want to put myself in the blessing too. I want to bless you all with an honest reckoning. Really, the bravery it takes, the courage it takes, and the endurance it takes to do an internal accounting, a cheshbon hanefesh, all the while remembering some really beautiful and vital things. You are beautiful. You are created in the image of God. And if we believe and pray for a world reborn, you are a part of that. You are an essential part of the rebirth. And we're not going to get there without naming all the broken stuff, inside and out. And what links us one to the next is that being created in the image of God doesn't mean we get through it unscathed. When we blow shofar, when we remember our stories, we re-enter things that are complicated, and we know that the story is bigger than ourselves, and that can be among the most beautiful of gifts. So may we, may you, may I, may us all, may we, everybody, be blessed with a year that's better than we expected. And may we do our own personal work to add beauty to the world, believing in it again. So thank you to myjewishlearner.com for hosting us all. Thank you to you all for joining this conversation. I'm very grateful that we took the time to learn, to sing a little bit, and to let the sounds in and out. So may be blessed with a good Elul and a beautiful, beautiful year to come. Take care, everybody.